In the autumn of 1916, with the German army 3 days from Bucharest, a queen sat in her palace watching servants pack wooden crates. Into those crates went everything: diamond tiaras, sapphire parures, strings of pearls, a turquoise suite her father had given her at her wedding. The crates were loaded onto trains headed for Moscow, to be held in the Kremlin until the war was over. The war ended. The Bolsheviks did not give the crates back. Marie of Romania lost almost her entire collection in a single night. And then, stone by stone, she built a new one, arguably more spectacular than anything she'd had before. What she assembled in the decade that followed would scatter across 3 continents, pass through Harry Winston's hands, and end up in a museum in Qatar, with one last tiara still being worn today by her great-granddaughter at state banquets in Amman and Stockholm. This is the story of that collection. And it begins, as so many royal stories do, with the Romanovs. Thank you so much for being here and for all your lovely comments. It genuinely means the world. If you want to follow these stories of royal jewelry, history, and the extraordinary lives behind the gems, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. There's a lot more to come. The woman behind the jewels. Marie Alexandra Victoria was born in 1875 at Eastwell Park in Kent, and her bloodlines were nothing short of imperial. Her father was Prince Alfred, Queen Victoria's second son. Her mother was Grand Duchess Maria Alexandrova, the only surviving daughter of Tsar Alexander II of Russia. 2 empires, 1 nursery. She turned down a proposal from her cousin Prince George, the future King George V. She might have been Queen of England. Instead, in 1893, she married Crown Prince Ferdinand of Romania, a quiet, dutiful Hohenzollern nephew who was the opposite of everything Marie was. Their wedding at Sigmaringen Castle was conducted 3 times. Once civil, once Catholic for him, once Anglican for her. Her mother, extraordinarily generous, gave her a substantial portion of the Romanov trousseau. Ferdinand wrote to his uncle King Carol I, "The gifts are pouring in, some of them incredibly valuable." Marie herself put it more directly. "I was a real daughter of Eve," she wrote later, "and loved clothes, furs, and precious gems." She became queen in 1914 when Carol I died, pushed Romania into the First World War on the Entente side, nursed soldiers through cholera outbreaks, fled German occupation with her children to Iași, and then went to Paris in 1919 and essentially charmed the Allied delegations into doubling Romania's territory. Clemențiu is said to have ordered that she be received with full military honors. She was 43. She was wearing extraordinary jewels. And she knew exactly what she was doing. By the time of her 1922 coronation, she described her collection as numbering around 400 pieces. She lived like a queen from an illuminated manuscript, caftans, turbans, Byzantine embroideries, self-decorated palaces on the Black Sea. She was the first reigning royal to publish her own autobiography. She toured the United States in 1926, 10,000 miles of celebrity appearances, and opened a museum in Washington state. When she died at Palliser Palace in 1938, the jewels scattered instantly, to her children, her grandchildren, auction houses, exile apartments, and eventually to dealers on 3 continents. This is what she owned. And what became of it? The wedding jewels, and the night they disappeared. Her first great tiara came from her mother at her 1893 wedding, a piece by Carrington of London, known as the diamond loop tiara. It was a horizontal diadem of interlocking diamond loops, graduating in size across the brow. Not the towering Russian kukoshnik she'd later make her signature, but a refined, English piece that suited a young crown princess finding her footing at a foreign court. She wore it at the coronation of Tsar Nicholas II in Moscow in 1896. She wore it for a portrait session around 1908 that survives in the Library of Congress Bain collection. Photographs showing her draped in pearls and looking, frankly, theatrical in the very best sense. She wore it for the Russian state visit of June 1914. For months later, Europe went to war. 2 years after that, in 1916, the Romanian government made the decision to evacuate the country's gold reserves. $120 tons, along with the royal family's treasure, to Moscow for safekeeping. The diamond loop tiara went into those crates. So did the sapphire and diamond bandeau that Ferdinand had given her personally on their wedding day, with its 5 sapphires and detachable diamond elements. So did the Romanian Marsin tiara, a piece originally made by Parisian master Oscar Marsin for Queen Elizabeth, featuring 16 large upright pearls between diamond scrolls. So did a turquoise tiara and parure her father had given her, redesigned by Kreuter and Company of Hanovre in 1904. After the Bolshevik Revolution, the Soviets refused to return any of it. Romania's diplomatic efforts continued for decades. A formal request was still being filed as recently as 2018. Marie wrote, "These have all now been annexed by the Bolsheviks. It was difficult to realize that they were all mine. She had nothing left, so she went shopping." The Vladimir Sapphire Kokoshnik, bought from a sister in exile. On the 12th of November, 1920, Marie bought the most important tiara of her life. It had been commissioned in 1909 by Grand Duchess Vladimir, one of the most powerful women at the Russian Imperial court, from Cartier in Paris. Its centerpiece was a 137.20 carat cushion-cut Ceylon sapphire of deep cornflower blue, originally a wedding gift from the Grand Duchess's in-laws, said to trace back to Charlotte of Prussia. Around it, 6 sapphire cabochons. Over all of it, old mine diamonds set in the high fan shape of a kukoshnik, the traditional Russian court headdress that frames the face like a halo with edges. The Vladimir jewels had been smuggled out of revolutionary Russia in a Gladstone bag. The sellers were Grand Duke Kirill and Grand Duchess Victoria Fyodorova, better known as Ducky, Marie's own sister. They were in exile and needed money urgently. Marie needed a collection. The price was agreed. She made it her signature. She wore it at her coronation in 1922, for the famous Philip de Laszlo portrait in London in 1924. On her 1926 American tour, at the Silver Jubilee Ball of King George V in 1935, and at a Petit Entente banquet in Bucharest in 1936. In every photograph, that enormous dark blue stone sits at the crown of her head like a sentence that cannot be argued with. When her favorite daughter Princess Ileana married in 1931, Marie gave her the kukoshnik as a wedding present. Ileana wore it once publicly, at a legitimist ball in Vienna, and for Christmases at Schloss Sonneberg. Then came the Second World War, the collapse of the Romanian monarchy, flight through Austria and Argentina and eventually America. By the early 1950s, Ileana needed money to buy a house and support 6 children. She sold the kukoshnik back to Cartier in New York. Cartier almost certainly broke it up. The 137-carat sapphire has not been publicly identified since. The 478-carat sapphire, the stone that carried her name across the world. There's a moment in the story of Queen Marie of Romania's great sapphire that tells you everything about the jewel world of the early 1920s. Cartier had exhibited this stone at their show in San Sebastian, a 478.68-carat cornflower blue cushion-cut Ceylon sapphire, no heat treatment, hanging from a diamond sautoir as the only pendant because no other stone was worthy to share the chain. Queen Victoria Eugenia of Spain, Marie's cousin, coveted it. She mentioned it to her husband King Alfonso XIII. He looked at the price and said, "Only the nouveau riches can afford such luxuries. We kings are the nouveau pauvres of today." In 1921, King Ferdinand of Romania bought it for Marie. The contracted price was somewhere between 1,275,000 and 1,375,000 French francs, payable in 4 installments to 1924, with a clause allowing cancellation in case of serious and unforeseen circumstances. She wore it at her coronation at Albury, hanging from Cartier's square-linked diamond chain, resting against the gold embroidery of her gown. An American journalist watching her arrive at a New York reception in 1926 described a heavy chain of diamonds, broken at intervals with squares of massive design, an unbelievable egg-shaped sapphire. That writer had never quite seen anything like it, and neither had most people. By Marie's 1933 will, "I leave the big diamond, gifted to me by King Ferdinand, to my beloved grandson Michael." Michael carried it into exile in 1947. In 1948, he sold it to Harry Winston to fund his life in Switzerland. Winston sold it on, eventually, through hands that included Queen Frederica of Greece, who wore it on her 1964 visit to New York and at her son King Constantine's wedding that same year, to an unknown collector. At Christie's Geneva on the 18th of November, 2003, a lot described only as the property of a noble family came under the hammer. The 478.68-carat sapphire, identified by its unique gemological record, the largest unheated sapphire ever offered at auction at that time, sold for 1,916,000 Swiss francs. It now belongs to the Qatar Museums in Doha. In the spring and autumn of 2025 it was displayed at the V&A in London, in Cartier's centenary exhibition, reunited, for the first time in decades, with another sapphire from the same original collection. The diamond sautoir, the chain that outlasted everything, almost. The sapphire didn't travel alone. Cartier had designed a sautoir to carry it, square-linked diamond elements, each connected by more diamonds, a chain so substantial that when the stone was finally sold away, the chain was still worth photographing by itself. Marie wore it at every major public occasion of the 1920s and 1930s. Marie wore it at every significant public occasion of the 1920s and 1930s. It passed at her death to her grandson King Michael, and in November 1947, just weeks before Michael was forced to abdicate, his mother Queen Helen of Romania wore it at the London wedding ball of Princess Elizabeth and Prince Philip. She wore it for one of the last times a piece from Marie's collection would appear at a great royal occasion while still intact. Princess Anne of Bourbon-Parma wore it with a diamond pendant. The sapphire was gone by then, at her 1948 wedding to King Michael in Athens. And then, it gradually ceased to exist as a coherent object. Queen Anne later found dismantled fragments, diamond links, disconnected elements, lying loose in the bottom of her jewelry box. The chain that had been photographed around Marie's neck at her coronation ended in a jewelry box, in pieces, in exile. The pearl tiara, rebuilt twice, lost once. One of the jewels Marie's mother brought from Russia was a Feyberge pearl tiara, most likely part of Grand Duchess Maria Alexandrova's 1874 imperial wedding trousseau, though the exact provenance was never recorded. One pearl alone was appraised at 400,000 Swiss francs after the Duchess's death in 1920. Marie inherited it and had loaned it to her daughter Queen Elizabeth of Greece for her own 1922 coronation festivities before sending it to Cartier in Paris to be rebuilt. What came back was extraordinary. Pear-shaped pearls suspended from arching diamond frames, the whole piece giving the impression of drops falling from a crown. Marie wore the rebuilt tiara on her 1926 American tour. When Marie died in 1938, it most likely went to Elizabeth, whose later life was spent in exile. She died in 1956, having formally adopted her male companion, Marc Favrat, 3 months before her death, and leaving almost everything to him. Whether the pearl tiara left with Favrat was quietly sold during Elizabeth's earlier years, or simply vanished in the chaos of post-war exile, nobody has been able to determine. It hasn't been seen since. The crown of a Byzantine queen, made from Transylvanian gold. On the 15th of October, 1922, at Albariulia, the town where a Romanian prince had briefly united the three principalities in 1599 and where the Union of 1918 had been proclaimed, Ferdinand and Marie were crowned monarchs of Greater Romania. Ferdinand, a Roman Catholic, refused to be anointed inside the Orthodox cathedral. The entire ceremony took place under a canopy outside. He placed the steel crown on his own head, then turned and crowned his wife. Marie was wearing something she had designed herself. She had refused the existing crown of Queen Elizabeth, a plain gold piece from 1881. "I want nothing modern that another queen might have," she told Ferdinand. "Let mine be all medieval." The crown was designed by the Romanian painter Costin Petrescu and executed by the Parisian house of Feliz. It was made entirely of Transylvanian gold from the Apennine Mountains, donated by a private mining owner specifically for the occasion, and weighed approximately 1.8 kilograms. The design was modeled on the medieval crown of Milica Despina of Wallachia, a 16th-century princess whose image appeared in a fresco at Curtea de Arge's monastery. The band was decorated with grains of wheat, rising to 8 large fleurons connected by interlaced branches, the whole surmounted by arches meeting in a globe and cross. Into it were set rubies, emeralds, amethysts, turquoises, opals, and large ornamental feldspar stones. From the sides hung pendilia, the Byzantine-style pendant chains that frame the face, one bearing the arms of Romania, the other the arms of the Duke of Edinburgh, Marie's own arms before her marriage. At the coronation she wore this crown over a 4-meter golden cloak embroidered with sheaves of wheat, with a gold straight gown beneath it and the 478-carat sapphire pendant at her throat. For the receptions that followed, she changed into the Vladimir Sapphire Kokoshnik, kept the sautoir and pendant, and received the diplomatic corps in what contemporary observers described as Byzantine fashion. A replica of the coronation crown stands at the Maryhill Museum of Art in Washington State, where a gown Marie wore to the 1896 coronation of Tsar Nicholas II is preserved. In the same building she inaugurated in person in 1926. The Greek key tiara, the one that survived. There is exactly one tiara from Queen Marie's collection that remains intact, in royal hands, and still worn at state occasions. It's not the Vladimir Kokoshnik. It's not the pearl tiara. It's a piece most people outside royal jewelry circles have never heard of. The Romanian Greek key meander tiara originated in Russia around 1905 as part of the collection of Victoria Melita, Duchess, Marie's sister and the woman who would later sell her the Vladimir Kokoshnik. It was a diamond kukoshnik, the repeating geometric Greek key or meander pattern across its face, low and wide, cut more like a crown than a crown. Marie bought it from Victoria Melita in 1920 and gave it away immediately as a wedding present to Princess Helen of Greece when Helen married Crown Prince Carol in 1921. Helen wore it through her turbulent marriage and subsequent divorce from Carol II. After Carol forced the royal family into exile in 1940, she kept it through years in Florence, then Lausanne, then Bucharest, until her death in 1982. It passed to her son King Michael and his wife Queen Anne. Queen Anne loaned it to her daughter Princess Maria for her 1995 wedding. Today it belongs to custodian of the Crown Margarita of Romania, Marie's great-granddaughter, who wears it as her principal tiara. She wore it at the wedding banquet of Crown Prince Al Hussein of Jordan and Princess Rajwa in Amman in 2023. She wore it at the birthday celebrations of the King of Sweden. It appears, every few years, at some state occasion photographed from a distance. A diamond kukoshnik, Russian in origin, Romanian by history, bought in 1920 for a sister who needed money, and still functioning as the crown of a royal house that no longer has a throne. Of everything Marie assembled, this quiet, geometric piece is what endured. The diamond fringe tiara, last seen at Sotheby's, 1960. Marie's mother had worn it in 1874, at her own wedding, as a Romanov bride. Grand Duchess Maria Alexandrova's diamond fringe tiara was a classic sunray fringe in the great 19th century Russian tradition. Diamond bars of graduating height set upright in a semicircle, giving the effect of a rising crown of light. It was not an unusual style among Russian imperial brides. It was, however, an unusually fine example of one. When the Duchess died in 1920, it went to her youngest daughter Beatrice, Duchess of Galliera. In 1933, Marie bought it from Beatrice, one sister selling to another, one generation to the next. She wore it for de Laszlo's 1936 portrait and at the Petit Entente banquet in Bucharest the same year. At her death it was inherited by her daughter Queen Maria of Yugoslavia, Mignon, who spent the rest of her life in exile in England after her husband King Alexander I was assassinated in Marseilles in 1934. In 1960, Mignon consigned the diamond fringe tiara to Sotheby's in London. Its current whereabouts are unknown. Marie of Romania wore jewels the way other queens wore armor. They were, as she wrote herself at the end of 1921, glamour and insurance, to be used in the hard times. She wasn't wrong about the hard times coming. Within a decade of her death, the Romanian monarchy had collapsed, Her son had gone into exile with his mistress, and her great sapphire was already in Harry Winston's hands. The replacement collection she'd assembled so carefully from the wreckage of Romanov Russia, the kukoshnik, the sautoir, the pearl tiara, was almost entirely gone within 20 years. Sold, dismantled, scattered across auction rooms and jewelry boxes and foreign bank vaults. What's left is oddly touching. A gold crown in Bucharest that weighs as much as a small child. A sapphire in Qatar on loan to a museum in London. A turquoise and pearl locket in Washington state, containing a lock of Queen Victoria's hair, given to Marie before she could even walk. And a diamond tiara in a kukoshnik shape. The only surviving thread connecting a 21st century royal house to the extraordinary woman who once described herself, without a trace of false modesty, as a real daughter of Eve who loved every gem. She really did.